Well, good morning. It's great to be back with you again, and both to you who are gathered here in person and to those who are joining us online. As I said, we're so happy to be back with you, and we're here, not just for a brief time at the moment, not just for a home assignment or for a medical leave like the last time, but as far as we know, Kathy and I are back here to stay. And one of the first things we want to do is to thank you, our church family, for your faithful support and your prayers for us and our family going back to 1991, when we first headed off to Guinea, West Africa, and then in Morocco, and most recently in Dakar, Senegal. In all of this, you have walked with us and partnered with us for the cause of the gospel and the spread of his kingdom. We cannot thank you enough for all of your love and your support over these many, many years. Thank you. Thank you. But now that we're back and getting ready to retire from missionary service, though not from ministry, we're waiting on God for what he now has for us. But for the moment, we are visiting our supporting churches, those that have also walked with us over these many years. And I've been asked to share some final words, so to speak, as missionaries. But when you talk about final words, it sounds a little bit ominous, doesn't it? A little bit like, don't call the electrician. I can fix it myself. Or I like this one. Look, I folded my parachute all by myself. Famous last words. But seriously, as we look back on our past missionary service and also to what lies ahead, something that I've been reflecting on is the subject of faith. And not just faith for our salvation, but faith that reveals itself at every moment, in every aspect of our lives. And so it's probably good, as we are going to talk about faith, something I said that is very important, especially given what the writer to Hebrews says, without faith it is impossible to please God. But in saying that, we should probably ask, what does faith actually look like? How is faith supposed to work itself out in our lives at every moment and in every situation? Well, for this morning, knowing that a picture is worth 1,000 words, I want us to look at the greatest examples of faith. A man who has been called the father of faith, and that's Abraham. And looking at Abraham, I want us over the next 2 weeks to look at two stories that give us a powerful picture of faith. Now, next week, we'll be looking at a story from the end of Abraham's journey. But for today, I want us to turn to a story that comes from the beginning of it. The calling of Abraham. So if you've got your Bibles, you can turn to Genesis chapter 12 or read on the screen behind us. Genesis chapter 12. The Lord had said to Abraham, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all people on earth will be blessed through you." As the Lord had told him. And him. Abraham was 75 years old when he set out for Haran. He took his wife Sarah, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran. And they set out for the land of Canaan. And they arrived there. Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Moreh at Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. From there he went on toward the hills east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. Then Abram set out and continued toward the Negev. Well, there it is. It's really our first encounter with Abraham. And it comes in a story that begins with these 6 words. The Lord had said to Abram. And let's stop there right for a moment. Okay? 6 words that, to be honest, we often pass over. We skip over them quickly in order to get to the real story and its message of faith. But something that we need to realize is that this opening comment about God speaking is where Abraham's journey of faith begins. This is where it all starts. Because you see, faith is always our response to the God who comes to us and who speaks to us. It's not about us going to God to get him to do what we want, but trusting God enough to listen to him and then do what he wants. So for Abraham, as he listens to the voice of God, he responds in faith by obeying what God is calling him to do. Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. Now, that's a pretty big ask, if there ever was one. I mean, God is not wanting Abraham to simply take a few baby steps. I mean, he's calling for a huge leap here. First of all, we'll just look at the progression. First, God calls him to leave his country, the land that is home, the place that he loves, and that has very much shaped his identity and his way of thinking. I know this is true for me. I mean, growing up in Canada, one of the things that I learned very early on from my parents and from everyone else around me is that when you get to a place and there's a lineup, you go to the back of the lineup and you wait your turn. Butting in, pushing your way into the front of the line does not go over well here. It's a big no-no. It's rude, it's inconsiderate. You just don't do it. Respecting others means that I go to the back of the line and as impatient as I might feel, I wait my turn. That's what it's like here in Canada. It's not like that in other places of the world, believe me. Something that struck me very quickly when, after having just arrived in Guinea, and Jack and Lynn, are you here? No. Oh, there you are. Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about. We arrived there, and after about a month, we had to go back to the airport to take our kids to Ivory Coast, to school there. And when we get to the airport, we work our way through the gauntlet of the police and the gendarmes and the soldiers, and when we finally make it through them with our luggage intact, we go to the check-in counter. And I walk up to the check-in counter, and I'm about to stick my tickets to the ticket person there. But all of a sudden, I've got 10 other people. They're crowding around me. They're putting their tickets in front of me. There's someone behind me who's tall. He's reaching over my shoulder, my head, putting his tickets there in the face of the ticket agent. And I'm thinking, dude, what's going on here? Wait your turn. I didn't quite know how to say that in Manukau at the time, but it was crazy. Obviously, waiting your turn in line was not something that people in that country at that time became aware of, although it's actually started to happen a bit more as of late. But it's very different there. And I'll be honest with you, there are times where I still get a little irked when that happens. But I got to be a big boy and grow out of that at some point. But all it is, I know that waiting in line, not butting in, is not really that big of a deal. But it still does reveal how much of who we are, for good or for bad, is shaped by where we come from. And yet God comes to Abraham when he is 75 years old, an age when change does not come easily. And he says, go from your country. Leave it behind. And then God calls him to leave his society, the people he knows and who know him, those with whom he shares a common language and culture. He is to leave all of that and become a stranger in a foreign land, living amongst the people he will not always be able to fit in with or fully relate to. He will for sure have times when he feels out of his element, along with the loneliness that can often come in situations like that. Still, God says, go from your people. And finally, God tells Abraham to leave his father's family, those with whom he shares the closest of relationships, as well as the security and safety that is found in a large, extended family. You know, that's why today so many people who leave their home and family for a better life elsewhere, they so often return to where they came from. Because for all the problems they were wanting to escape, still, that is where their family is. That's where they find a deep sense of belonging. But God said to Abraham, go from your father's household. It's a journey where Abraham is called to leave so much that he is familiar and comfortable with, all that he has looked to and depended upon for his sense of belonging, identity, safety, security. In the end, God is calling him to walk away from his past and instead turn his eyes to the future, and an unknown future at that. Listen again to what God says. Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. And all that Abraham can do is respond to what God is saying, stepping out in faith, with nothing to hold on to but the promise of God. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So, 75 years of age, Abraham trusts God and heads out on what will be a one-way journey, never to return. There is no return ticket here. And again, he does so uncertain where the path would lead or how long it would take. Which isn't to say that he didn't have any expectations, any thoughts for how, at least in his mind, God should work everything out. Lord, this is how I want the itinerary to be planned, type thing. It kind of reminds me of the statement, how do you make God laugh? Tell him your plans? Yep. But as things turned out for Abraham, well, his journey did not unfold in any way that he would have expected. And in the end, he spent the final 100 years of his life as a wandering nomad, never seeing the fulfillment of God's promises. And yet this is what we are told in Hebrews 11. By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. In a song from the TV show, The Rings of Power, the sun is fast falling beneath trees of stone. The light in the tower, no longer my home. Past eyes of pale fire, black sand for my bed. I trade all I've known for the unknown ahead. Call to me, lands far away, for I must now wander this wandering day. Away I must wander this wandering day. Of drink I have little, and food I have less. My strength tells me no, but the path demands yes. My legs are so short, and my way is so long. I've no rest nor comfort, no comfort but song. Sing to me, lands far away. Oh, rise up and guide me this wandering day. Please promise to find me this wandering day. At last comes the answer through cold and through frost, that not all who wonder or wander are lost. No matter the sorrow, no matter the cost, that not all who wonder or wander are lost. Faith, trusting God enough to obey him, even when it means leaving behind much of our past. Only then can we embrace the future that God is calling us into. That's what faith is, a picture of which we are given here from the life of Abraham. So what does all of this mean for us today? How is this to play out in our own lives? Well, I rather suspect that over the years, especially here at Seven Oaks, where world missions has historically played a huge role in the life and the ministry of our church, we can tend to see Abraham's journey as a picture of God's calling to missionary service, to leave Canada for the regions beyond, to live amongst a new people, to learn one or more foreign languages, to adapt to a different culture. You know, much like God said to Abraham, go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. And in part, this story does speak to that. But in the end, it is about something far greater than just a missionary calling. It speaks to the journey of faith that every one of us is continually invited into, even when that journey does not involve us going off to far-off lands as a missionary. This journey of faith is first and foremost a willingness to listen to the God who speaks in his word and also in prayer, in silence before him, in solitude with him, waiting silently, learning how to hear and discern his voice, and then trusting God enough to obey him, even when it means leaving behind some of our past. That which we are familiar and comfortable with, what we look to for security and well-being, possibly those things we've relied on for a sense of purpose and meaning. Not that those things are necessarily wrong, mind you, or sinful. As often as not, they will often be the good things that God has blessed us with in the past. But they might not serve us well on the journey now God wants to take us into a new future. You know, the things that we look to for security and well-being, all those things that we depend upon and rely upon, good things that will end up getting in the way, holding us back from what he now wants to do in our hearts and souls, and then through us in the lives of others. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. A promise that is as much for those in their 60s, 70s, and 80s as it is for those in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. Because God's work in us and through us never ends. There's always more that he's wanting to do. There's always more that he is calling us into. A new and greater future. Something that Kathy and I have had to reflect upon in new ways over the past 6 months. You see, when we returned back to Senegal in January of 24, after my heart surgery, we went back and we were kind of expecting that our next 2 full years would be years of helping our congregation there move through a period of transition. Transition on a whole number of levels, including possibly our departure, which we had envisioned to take place probably in December of this year or maybe the beginning of next year. But then one Monday morning in September of last year, God spoke to both Kathy and myself independently of each other, separately. And he came to each of us and he said that our time for leaving Dakar was going to be around Easter in April of this year. Wow, that was a lot sooner than we had expected. It was a lot sooner than what our church leadership had expected. And so as we talked about it and we prayed about this together and went into group discernment together to hear more and to make sure, Lord, what are we hearing from you in all of this? There were moments when some of our church board was saying, are you sure? Can you just stay for a bit longer? And even Kathy and myself, as our 5 years there were incredible. We saw God doing great things. But the last 6 to 7 months, we began to witness in new and even greater ways the working of God in people's lives. And we found ourselves wondering, Lord, why are you asking us to leave now? Why? And though there were some things that we were looking forward to coming back, in other ways, we weren't sure that we really wanted to leave. So when others are saying, hey, can you just delay it a bit? As tempting as it would have been at moments, yet we couldn't get past the point God had come to both of us. God had spoken. And we had to say, okay, no, God has said in April. And we don't know what lies ahead. We don't know what is before us. But we know what God has spoken. He has called us to come back to Canada. And so whatever that journey is going to be, whatever that future is, we're going to trust God for it. And that is God's invitation to each of us, to follow in the footsteps of Abraham, responding in faith to the God who speaks, calling us at times to walk away from our past, from those good things about which we might have told ourselves, I cannot ever imagine living without them. Or even more strongly, I'm not willing to do without them. But sometimes God comes calling us to walk away from those very things in our past that he's putting his fingers on. And to do so fully confident that he is leading us into a future where in even greater ways he will be profoundly present with us, personally engaged in us, and powerfully at work through us. Whatever we might be called to leave behind from the past, the future that God is leading us into will be worth unimaginably more than all we are walking away from. On our first Sunday back a couple of weeks ago, it was in many ways a bittersweet moment for Kathy and myself. Though it was good to see all of you again, we were carrying a sense of sorrow and grieving, knowing that we would no longer be with our church family back in Dakar. And no longer would we be able to share in what God is doing amongst them. And to be honest, there was a sense of emptiness that we carried. And yet as the service began and the worship team began to lead us in songs, these songs were resonating deeply with the longing of our hearts, which was that as a new chapter opens up for a fresh outpouring of God's Spirit, a future where we might enter more fully into the presence and power of God in ways even more than we've ever known before. And in singing those songs, I was suddenly reminded of what God had been impressing upon me when we were back during our medical leave, during that time there. And if you remember, I shared it with you, a promise that I was convinced God had for us as a church and for his people. Pour out my Spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my Spirit in those days, and they will prophesy. God, profoundly present with us, personally engaged in our lives, powerfully at work through us. As individuals and as a church. As we are being called, even as a congregation, into a new time of transition and change. A new future. All of this part and parcel of what God promised his people through Jeremiah. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. So, as we listen to God and his promises for us, let us respond in faith. The kind of faith that is expressed in obedience to what he is saying and calling us into. Even when it means laying aside some of the things from our past that we have become familiar and comfortable with, things we are holding on to and relying upon for a sense of stability and security. Laying them aside so that we can embrace the future that he is planning. Confident that your love, Lord, reaches to the heavens, your faithfulness to the skies. We feast on the abundance of your house. You give us drink from your river of delights. For with you is the fountain of life. In your light, we see light. Our God who is faithful. He has a future for us that will take us far beyond anything we've known. But part of that is responding in faith, and when he leads, being willing to lay aside some of the things in our lives that have made up our past, as good as they might be, but leaving them behind so that we can embrace that future that he has for us. Yes.